can stop a problem
Oh,
before it starts. Here we go.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a Ukrainian show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and our guest today is Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here as always.
Okay. Normally, we are accompanied by our own Ivan Kucherenko from Kiev, and let's hope that he will show up a little bit later. He will join us as soon as that will happen. In the meantime, Ukrainians are doing absolutely amazing things. They're
It's
getting attacked all
astonishing.
over the front. The Russians are leaving their positions, and they're trying to save themselves from Ukrainian attacks. And they're doing that so skillfully in such a tempest in different directions, including Crimea. By the way, I think Crimea finally
Yes,
will
they're finally starting to
from
we're going to
news.
throw that counterpunch I told you about.
Yes, I think it's about to happen. Actually, it is happening because they destroyed so many targets in Crimea that if they wish, I think they could occupy Crimea in the next 48 hours. I don't know if it's part of their plans right now, but if it is, I think they can do it.
Well, just to give you a quick historical analogy, the Soviet army in World War II on the Eastern Front, when they began launching their offensives, at one point in 1944, in 1943-44, after the failed German offensive at Citadel at Kursk, then the Soviet army began launching a series of offensives in sequence. Where they would launch offensive on one front, then they would, once that one ran out of steam, then they would launch an offensive on another front and continually keep the Germans off balance, and just. And of course, the Soviet army was aided by the fact that by all those Ford trucks that the United States was giving them, which helped boost their.
They have massive superiority at that time already.
Yeah,
So,
they did. So it didn't matter. They didn't have to mass on a particular front. They had overall superiority, thanks to the very big victory at Stalingrad, and then another just as good, the victory at Kursk. By that time, it didn't matter because the only way the Germans could have saved themselves, or at least prolonged the war, or possibly created a stalemate, would be is if they had pulled back sharply, and shortened their front lines to create strategic reserves. But of course, Hitler refused to do that. And in essence, he did the Allies a big favor by his no retreat order. But now in this case, with the Ukrainians, we have a situation where the Russian army, as we have noted, their casualties and their rate of reduction is exceeding their recruitment and reinforcement rate. Their army overall is growing smaller vis-a-vis the Ukrainian army. And now, of course, thanks to the disruption of the Starlink, because Elon Musk has cut off Russia's access to Starlink, that has produced confusion and lack of coordination on the Russian side in trying to defend or react to the Ukrainian counteroffensives. So now the Ukrainians have both the initiative and they have the momentum, and they have, because they've been steadily reducing the Crimean air defenses, and this now creates an opportunity, an even bigger opportunity, because the Russians can't afford to react. They're busy enough trying to react to the Ukrainian counteroffensives on the Eastern Front. They don't have anything left over, for my estimation. They don't have anything left over to react to a Russian offensive against Crimea, a Ukrainian offensive against Crimea. So this is a very favorable situation, even better than I was expecting. I mean, I was expecting success to tie up the Russians on the Eastern Front, and then wait for the proper moment to launch an offensive against Crimea. But now they're able to do both. So this is astonishing.
What's interesting is that it's all happened while Russia got permission to sail its oil use situation in the Middle East, and but you see, it's a long-term perspective. Okay, they will get some money sooner or later, so maybe they can buy some ammunition here and there. But Ukrainians are attacking so precisely and so quickly that all this oil money may not even help
It,
Russians.
it may be irrelevant.
It could become irrelevant, absolutely.
And of course, we are seeing whether it's having the Trump administration's war against Iran, we've noted, is also having a secondary beneficial effect on the Ukrainian war, because a lot of the Shahed, the drone facilities in Iran, have been destroyed. There are a great number of drone attacks that the Iran has been able to execute in these first few days has dropped off sharply, which means that the Iranians don't really have any real means of shipping significant numbers of drones to the Russians for them to use, because they've been using quite a few. So that is having a secondary good effect on the Ukrainian front by reducing the number of drones that the Russians can use against the Ukrainians.
So Ukrainians' experience and knowledge in drones technology, it's in demand right now because so many Arab states now are talking to Ukraine. United States is talking, so it's quite an interesting development.
So the Ukrainians, you just think of it, the Ukrainians, thanks to their successful investment in drone technology and building up that capability, they are now in an excellent position to market their expertise and their manufacturing capability to not just the United States, but to other customers who will all be eager for drone technology and for defense against drones. And oh, by the way, I received an article from one of my sources, a summation that showed that the Israelis have now put in place a layered defense of laser weapons to combat drones and short-range missiles. They are improving their Iron Dome, so to speak. They are improving they don't have to worry about intercontinental missiles because it's just not possible. It's not needed. But all those laser weapons that have been successfully integrated into the Israeli defense also is going to have, I predict, its own knock-on effect that benefits the United States. I discussed in previous programs the possibility of fixing what I call the hole in the Golden Dome. The hole in the Golden Dome is, of course, the fact that they don't recognize they don't have an effective defense right now against intercontinental ballistic missiles because they come in at a very high arc, and that the only way that you can realistically stop ICBMs is to destroy them in their boost phase while they are on their way up and they are at their most vulnerable. The way you do that, as I've suggested, is to put laser weapons on starships. Where do you get the starships from? You buy them from SpaceX. You create a space fleet. You put those laser weapons on board those starships, and now you've got a system that can destroy nuclear missiles in their boost phase. And that in effect will plug the hole in the Golden Dome and make possible President Trump's goal to attain what I call initial operational capability by the end of his term. Not full operational capability. Impenetrable full operational capability would have to occur in whatever presidential term follows this President Trump's second term. But initial operational capability will be enough, in my estimation, to create massive uncertainty in the minds of any nation, particularly Russia or China, that is contemplating threatening the United States with intercontinental ballistic missile attack. So all sorts of interesting, thanks to the Ukrainians' initiative and their ability and their investment. This is creating numerous opportunities which no one would have foreseen prior to the start of the Russian-Ukrainian war. It's an amazing effect. And so right now, it's fascinating to watch and to see, and I wish the Ukrainians absolute success in both their current offensive in the east, and as well as what you and I have been anticipating, the offensive against the Crimea, to force the surrender, cut them off from supply and reinforcement, and use the strategic reserves that I have no doubt that the Ukrainians have assembled to launch that counteroffensive against Crimea and force the surrender of the Crimea back to Ukraine.
Do you think, Jonathan, that in this situation, Ukraine can become a factor in the international market for weapons?
Absolutely.
With drones,
Absolutely.
and now
That's a start.
production,
Look,
it could become enormous, interesting business for Ukraine.
and it could, and it could become a factor, but because they have shown such initiative and ingenuity in developing new techniques and weaponry, and because, as you've noted, they have developed, they already had a substantial defense industry. They were an integral part of the former Soviet Union's defense industry and capability. But now they can exploit that expertise and market successfully all sorts of weapons and technologies to willing customers, not just the United States, but all Europeans. Of Europe's going to want those things. Israel may even want to cooperate. You may see a developing relationship between Israel and Ukraine.
And all the Gulf states.
Yeah, they're all going to want them. They're all going to want those things, particularly if Iran, for example, the objective of the Trump administration's current war, they deliberately want to keep it short. They're going to just use their standoff capabilities to destroy Iran's capability for manufacturing nuclear weapons or a nuclear weapon, and their missile delivery capability. That's the key. If they can keep them off balance, keep them suppressed, and sort of kick the can down the road a bit, destroy it and keep it for about 2 or 3 years away, that's what the Trump administration would like to do. Just keep them off balance until hopefully the Iranian people are able to change their leadership. Right now, you've even got the Kurds invading Iran. Of course, that's going to be a low-level effort. The Kurds are not going to be able to topple the current Iranian regime all by themselves. There'll be a distraction. It may increase internal instability within Iran. But all of these factors will play together and create events that you and I, it may exceed our fondest expectations. That's why I'm saying.
Jonathan, I heard one opinion from one of the U.S. generals, by the way, that Iran is playing a rope-a-dope strategy with the U.S. They are hidden. Most of their drones and missiles and everything is deep underground, so they're not destructible easily. And they let Americans do all the bombing and attacks and everything else on the belief that initially U.S. had 800 tomahawks, and that could be used in the first 2-3 days of the war, and remaining 4,000 tomahawks, they have to be delivered from the United States to the Mideast to be used, and even that will cover a few more days of the bombardment. And then what? So it's hard to say. It's
a waiting game. It's a waiting game, contest of political wills. That it's going to lead to a very complex phase. I believe President Trump is also looking at reactivating the Defense Production Act that was used in order to encourage and activate the defense industry to not go quite to wartime mobilization, but enabling them to increase their production of high priority weapons. So there is that. So it won't be a forever war. But something that may call for essentially constant vigilance.
What about the boots on the ground?
Boots on the ground, I don't see.
Can you achieve anything its aims?
Here's how boots on the ground would work. It would not be U.S. boots on the ground. The ones you have to rely on are the ones who are closest to the action, who have the most at stake. That would be the Israelis and the Kurds. The Israelis and the Kurds would be a major internal distraction for the Iranians. The Israelis, for their part, the Mossad has a very well-developed intelligence network within Iran. Yeah. So much so that the Iranian political leaders are afraid to do much of anything because they don't know who's a Mossad agent and who isn't. So you could have the Israelis would be providing the U.S. and possibly the Kurds a very valuable commodity: information, location, those things that, and if they can establish that, that would aid precise targeting for the United States for the subsequent use of their tomahawks. If they could give you precisely where those things are, and they could get their assessment of, uh, are these things vulnerable to attack by U.S. tomahawks or even the so-called bunker busters? So you would have, it's that's a long-term action, and the U.S. would not have to act again after this current military operation until the Israelis perhaps inform them, or along with the U.S. intelligence community, that there is a danger that the Iranians are achieving again some sort of missile delivery capability or are very close to developing a nuclear weapon. But it's a a program of constant vigilance, which will, I would say, again, barring the total collapse and of the current Iranian regime, there will be a need for constant monitoring. The U.S. intelligence community can do that. We have the capability to constantly monitor, but they will not. I predict they will not go to actually putting boots on the ground, because they will have learned. Their advisors will have told them, our previous experience with boots on the ground in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, no thank you. We don't want that.
Jonathan, but remember to compare Iran to Afghanistan and Iraq. It's Iraq and Afghanistan is like nice little flowers compared to Iran. Iran
Correct.
is the most. It's not just the biggest by far of the all countries there. It's also the most fanatical, the most aggressive nation of all history of the world, I would say. And
to be able to sustain a low level or constant effect war effort against one nation, albeit at a low level or a terrorism level, not necessarily a conventional level, but they have an unmistakable desire to acquire nuclear weapons, because they have learned, their perception of history is that if you want to be considered a nation of consequence, you have to have nuclear weapons.
John, Personally, I don't believe in the availability of building nuclear weapons for Iran. To me, it was a political ploy to project power or possible power and use it for negotiations of all kinds or so on. I don't believe even 1% of the possibility for Iran to build a nuclear missile, especially when Israel and the United States and many other countries are watching.
For the very first time.
I'm afraid of the following. Knowing the Iranian determination and aggressiveness and vindictiveness, I'm afraid that regardless of outcome of the war and how quickly that outcome would be achieved, Iranians will attack American assets, Americans themselves, all over the world, including their embassies in the Gulf, in Europe. And I even think about something. Okay, take 4 or 5 well-armed Iranians attacking, let's say, one of the gated communities in Florida. Where a few thousand people live. What do you think these people can do? Just lie down and die. They will not be able to do anything. So there is no remedy in America itself and all American assets around the world, American citizens around the world, and so on. So that will lead to much reduced travel, a lot of precautions that American citizens have to bear. And even that, I'm not so sure that it will defend them well against Iranian assassins or fighters, or you can call them anything you want. So therefore, I really don't see any positive outcome of this war. Now, also, I would like to mention something. There are 2 wars, not one. There is a war of Israel against Iran. There is a war of U.S. against Iran. And there are already frictions between Israel and U.S. And today, Kushner and Witkoff, they're flying to Israel, or maybe they're already in Israel to discuss so on, because Israel is trying to annihilate anything Iranian, whether it's military targets or civilian targets, doesn't matter what targets, but to inflict as much damage as ever possible. That's the goal of Israel, nothing else.
Yeah.
Now, America wants to have, once everything will be settled, they want, as they did in Venezuela, get access to Iranian oil. They want to get access to Iranian gold resources, if there are any, and so on. So therefore, they disagree with Israelis destroying their future assets. So America wants to preserve their future assets, not to destroy them. And Israel doesn't look that way. They don't need Iran.
Israel is looking pretty much at what people would call a Carthaginian peace.
Yes, exactly.
Essentially,
100%
just destroy it as a national entity. Maybe not to the extent of eliminating Iranian existence, although they would not be shedding any tears over that outcome. But I would think that Israel's political goals are more absolute than those of the United States. And so there are now this is not the first time in history that allies have had disagreements. For example, again, even in World War II, it took us a while to agree that unconditional surrender must be the goal in fighting the Axis, because otherwise the Axis would have, certainly Nazi Germany would have had an opening to negotiate a separate peace and freeze things there. But because of unconditional surrender, the goals became absolute. It had to be fought to the finish. It had to end with the occupation of Nazi Germany, and also Italy. Italy was the easiest, actually, and Japan. And remember, we had plans for originally the plan was to defeat Germany first, then switch forces from the European theater to the Pacific theater in preparation for Operations Olympic and Coronet, which would have been the invasions of the Japanese home islands. And as you know, we were projecting about a possible 1 million casualties alone in the invasion of Japan. But because of that, our insistence, and what made possible, of course, that unconditional surrender of Japan was the use of the atomic bomb, ironically enough. That was the only thing that could shock the Japanese into surrender, because their religion and their outlook preferred death to surrender.
And not even after the first bomb, only after the second one, where they believe that they may have tenths of this bomb.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, the strange thing was we had exactly 2 bombs at that point. The second one, it says, okay, are you going to surrender now? And fortunately, it wasn't quite a bluff, but it was basically saying we're ready to drop more. It would have taken a long time for us to actually crank up the production facilities, limited as they were at the time, to produce more atomic bombs. But we had those 2, and for a short period after World War II, as one commentator put it, we were shadow boxing with the rest of the world. The rest of the world thought we had all of these atomic bombs, and we didn't.
Yeah.
We didn't. It wasn't until the Korean War when we did that.
Soviets learned something from it in 1962. They pretended that they have hundreds of these bombs. They had only 6.
6. They had 6 intercontinental ballistic missiles.
Yes,
we found that out because of our U-2 spy plane overflights.
Yeah.
They've got only 6, and they were all above ground, not in silos. So in theory, we could have destroyed those 6 Soviet intercontinental ballistic missile sites with our bomber force, because it would have taken them too long. Yeah. So this is why the intelligence community is such an invaluable asset for the U.S. and its foreign policy.
Yes.
Without an extensive intelligence community, we would be largely operating in the dark, and we would be more susceptible to strategic bluffing and for basically nations to try and wait us out. But intelligence is an absolutely invaluable asset to the United States, especially in this situation, and it will continue to be for the foreseeable future. So right now, it's and as you and I and Ivan have discussed on this program. They're just watching, and we have been waiting for this moment, shall we say, for the past 2 or 3 years, where Ukraine has built up its military capability and sophistication to the point where they can actually seize the initiative now, as they have done from the Russians. And it will be. I'm more optimistic that, if you want to call it optimism, optimistic that the Ukrainians will be able to follow up on the success on the Eastern Front and follow up with a successful counteroffensive that retakes the Crimea. Once that happens, that is going to change the entire political outlook and diplomatic outlook in Ukraine and among its allies. The United States and President Trump, because he does not like to look like a loser, he wants to back a winner. He's gonna have a come to Jesus moment, and he's going to say, I see I was wrong. Yeah, the Ukrainians are brave and heroic and deserve our full support. Now that would be nice, because he wants to be seen as being on the side of the victors.
Yeah, that's true. And I think by the time that they will resume so-called peace talks with
They'll just quietly, forget
the
about it.
situation will change to such a degree on the front line. So before
Yes.
Putin's was talking about you have to think about realities on the front lines. So
We would
that's
say,
different meaning now.
we would just say, we would be saying to Vladimir Putin, reality just changed.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
truth just
changing
changed.
and keep changing. And you know what's interesting that when Russians are attacking, they're very successful at it because they have some kind of it's not even in their doctrine, but maybe it's in their national character or so on. So they go all into attack, and it's become really magnified almost by hours now. But when they are in defense, the completely different effect is happening. They are going back. They leave their ammunition. They don't care about anything just to save their lives.
Right.
And it's even impossible to figure out when they are going to stop. Is there some kind of a line that they would achieve and they could stay there and hold the line? There's no such thing. They go all the way beyond the borders of Russia and Ukraine.
Well, because I would estimate it here at this point that the Russians had military and political leadership just as they never anticipated the degree of successful resistance that the Ukrainians would put up, they also never anticipated that they would be on the defensive. I don't believe they did They believed they could continually maintain the offensive and launch these, so you call it, it's called meat attacks, but that they could continually maintain it, and they would never be forced to have to cope with defense. Now, certainly the Germans in World War II, they never thought that they would have to be forced onto defense. But eventually they overextended themselves. The Russians successfully stopped them. And then at first, a local counteroffensive in 1941, but much larger counteroffensives in 42, 43, and 44. But the Germans the Germans had to adapt. The Russians in this situation, I do not believe, are capable of adapting.
No.
They're not capable of adapting. Therefore, the Ukrainians, once they have seized the initiative and continue their the equivalent of strategic bombing campaign and their massive use of drones, advancing under that drone shield that they have, that they will be able to keep the Russians retreating. And I'll keep in mind the Ukrainians. They apparently have a much better logistics system than the Russians, and the Ukrainians are much closer to their sources of supply than are the Russians.
And Russians are cut off Starlink, so there's a
so the communications they can't get information to their troops. Like, where do you shift?
Yeah.
And so it's amazing. The cohesiveness of their defense is disintegrating. And so this is an opportunity which the Ukrainians are not going to let go of.
And Russians have special internet channels which give well thought out instructions to Russians how to properly give up to Ukrainians and save their lives. step by step. So what you do, okay, you go over there, then you put up your hands and so on. And a lot of Russians now are doing exactly that because it's still preferable to just dying for nothing.
Yep. Yep.
The average life of Russian recruits, is 12 days.
Oh boy, now that's a grim statistic.
Yeah, so if you survive for 12 days, you know that your end is near. You're not going to last much longer.
Yeah, way many years ago, when we were talking in America, when they talked about, they had a funny little song. I won't sing it for you because the Eighth Amendment of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution forbids the imposition of cruel or unusual punishment. So I will not subject you to my singing.
Okay.
But what they had, there was this one verse. Let's see. They made me a second lieutenant. They pinned on my bars of gold. They made me a forward observer. I lived to be 10 seconds old.
So good. Yeah, sometimes you have to learn older songs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, John. To that, I would like to thank you very much for today's program, and I hope we will have even better news on Friday, where we will meet same place, same time. In the meantime, glory to Ukraine and
God bless America.
and United States, and we'll see you all on Friday, same place, same time.
Excellent.
Bye bye, everybody.